What is going on, guys? It is the Allaqcess podcast. I'm Bradley, joined with Gray today. Gray, how are you doing, buddy?
I'm absolutely fantastic, man. It's been a long time since I got to chat a little ball, but I'm definitely here for it.
Yeah, it's been a long time. Happy to be back. NFL, spring training, I think I called it by accident earlier. Preseason is coming up soon, and I am excited about it. What's the biggest storyline that you've had so far? While we wait some people to get in here, what have you been watching so far?
I mean, you saw that Josh Allen pick a fight today on Twitter. I know people were blowing up about that one. Reminded me a little bit of a preseason 2015 Cam Newton jawing with Josh Norman a little bit. Maybe a sign for something to come.
See, I thought the same thing too. And just to go ahead and jump right into it, how do you feel about that from your quarterback? People say it about Baker. He's got that dog in him, right? I think when Josh Allen did that, he starts going after a defensive tackle. First off, ludicrous. Secondly, he's got that dog in him, right?
Definitely. And I mean, I think any player can recognize that the game flows through the quarterback, right? So you're naturally going to play for that guy. You know that, he's got to be involved at some way, shape, or form. But to see your quarterback, put himself on the line like that and kind of jar up that energy and that emotion a little bit, I think it only makes you want to play for a guy like that even more, and that certainly can't be a bad thing. So I even think on the defensive side, right? I mean, as a defense, you get a stop, you want to know that the guy getting on the field after that stop is dog, right? You want to know that he's going to go out there and take that interception you just got and go do something with it. So even for a defense, who's receiving some of that from Josh Allen, I don't think it's a bad thing at all. I think it drives them to be more competitive. And shoot, I've been waiting for something like that in Carolina for a couple of years now. Hopefully Baker is it, right?
Yeah, exactly. So once again, this is the Allaqcess podcast, your home for sports and now fantasy sports here in the Queen City and the Carolinas. You can come here every single week. Myself and Gray will be talking fantasy football, NFL news, as we just were before, and as well as the Carolina Panthers we'll get into a little bit later on in the stream. If you have any questions, comments, concerns, thoughts, you want to tell us we just look good. If you want to tell Gray he needs to go get a haircut, tell him he needs to go get a haircut. Put it in the chat because you are technically the third host in the show. You help drive the direction of the discussion. So we're happy to take any and all the comments. Join us live again on Sunday nights here on the Allaqcess podcast. So we were just talking about the Josh Allen thing, picking a little bit of a fight. What other storylines have you seen out there so far? Anything that really piques your interest?
Yeah, sure. I mean, outside of Carolina, because we'll get into that a little bit, certainly have been looking around the league. I love watching any quarterback battle. I really was tuned into Atlanta here this week a little bit. A couple clips came out of Drake London and kind of his impact that he's starting to have over there. And, man, he looks impressive. I'll tell you what. Yeah. Like, some guys just have it, and when you watch him move on that field at 6'4", he can move like a guy who's 6'2", and it's scary. I've watched him do a little fake, it was like a fake flag and a slant route during practice, and he totally had this guy in the blender. I think I retweeted that one, and he had another just really nice stuttering little go route, and it was underthrown a little bit, and he had to work back up towards the ball through his defender. I mean, he's a fast guy, but he's physical. He's got a really, really good stature. So I've enjoyed watching him at Atlanta. I've been kind of tuning into him. I did draft him in a dynasty league this year too. So I tend to keep an eye on those guys a little bit more. I would say that I'm actually really intrigued by the Jaguars this year. I think that whole Urban Meyer situation for Trevor Lawrence was a real bum situation for him. And, you got ETN coming back off that injury. You got Trevor Lawrence stepping into year 2 with probably a much better coaching situation. I'm intrigued to see if Jacksonville can, shake up a few things down there at the bottom. There's a lot of things to look for this year, man, and we could sit here all day and talk about them. I really think I tend to look where it matters to me. NFC South fantasy football, that's kind of where my eye tends to flow.
So, I was gonna say I definitely pay attention to the NFC South. I love the NFC picture. I love looking at what is going on in the NFC South. As you mentioned, Drake London looks really, really good. It's still a question mark what they're going to do at the running back position in Atlanta. So I'm sure we'll get into that one day closer to the season. There's 2 storylines I'm really interested in. You hit on one. the Jacksonville Jaguars, I'm still a Trevor Lawrence believer. I think Trevor Lawrence has what it takes to be an NFL caliber quarterback. I think the new coaching staff is sincerely going to help him. Christian Kirk, I'm a believer in. I don't know if he's worth $94 million or whatever that they decided to pay him. I don't know if he's worth that, but they have a lot of weapons out there now, and so if he's going to do it, this is the year.
Sure.
Yeah.
Sorry, go ahead.
The other one is Baltimore Ravens. Before I forget, they have a lot of new weapons they've added. They lost Hollywood Brown, but they have James Proche. They have I can't remember, Devin Duvernay, Rashad Bateman. They picked up Isaiah Likely, who we're very familiar with in Sunbelt football play, and absolutely dominating tight end. I think Lamar Jackson can make the best of a decent situation, and that's what he's in right now.
I completely agree with that. And I would say I saw a throw from Lamar today, actually, on Twitter.
Yeah.
And it was like really nice little play action down. Probably hit a receiver, I would say, like 40, 45 yards down the field, right in the pocket, dropped it right over somebody. I mean, he takes a lot of flack, that guy. And, I'm not going to sit here and argue that I think he's the most accurate guy in the league, but I think he catches way too much criticism from people for, the talent that I've seen him be. And to be fair, the weapons that they've provided him on the outside, I can't say, Hollywood Brown's probably the best receiver he's ever had there with him. And I think Hollywood Brown's still yet to, prove that he's necessarily a number one guy anywhere. So, I mean, it reminds me a little bit of Cam also in certain ways from his tenure with the Panthers and him just being an absolutely dominant athlete that got hounded on for using his legs and had to a lot of times because he didn't have as much support as maybe you would have assumed ahead of time. I think if Lamar had a true number one there, man, it would make his life a lot easier. And you would see, some of that monster production that you see from some of these other guys like Mahomes or, Russell Wilson, who had number one guys at the time. Tyreek Hill at the time with Mahomes, DK, a number one guy for sure at the time with Wilson. Like they've all had people that they could, bounce off of and rely on. And I'm not necessarily sure Lamar has had that yet. I would say his tight end, Mark Andrews, is probably the closest thing that he's got, similarly to Cam Newton with Greg Olsen. So I would have to say that the situations reflect each other for me a little bit.
Yeah, and just to kind of roll over into some fantasy sports, who you mentioned the role of Patrick Mahomes and the wide receiver situation that he has. I personally think Juju Smith-Schuster is someone that's on my fantasy radar. He's someone that is going to come into this league, or not come into the league. He's going to a new team. He's going to be playing from a position he's familiar in the slot. If you follow me on Twitter at Brad Emily, you know that I am a big fan of Juju Smith-Schuster in the year that he's going to have. I know they drafted Sky Moore. They bring in, Marquez Valdez-Scantling from Green Bay. Right. They bring in a couple of weapons, but I think Juju Smith-Schuster is going to have a big season. Is there anyone that's kind of flying under the radar in fantasy football?
Well, first of all, I'll comment on what you said. I would have to say that I tend to agree. One thing I talk a lot about in fantasy is target share, right? So your opportunities on the field will directly correlate with how many points you score. I mean, it does every single time. You could have a great athlete, and if he's second or third on the food chain there, then, it will impact his production nonetheless. So, with a team like Kansas City, you have a guy in Tyreek Hill who's leaving, who eats up an absolutely massive chunk of target share for them. On top of that, scoring as well. Tyreek Hill's their home run hitter, definitely a touchdown, manufacturer for them. Travis Kelce is definitely getting up there in his age. They're going to use him, but they, might not want to have to lean on him for 8-10 targets a game like they've maybe have in the past. So they are going to be looking to supplement that somewhere else. And so you're going to see that come in the form of targets to Juju, targets to Marquez Valdez-Scantling, targets to Hardman, and potentially Sky Moore. I think it'll come down to who Pat Mahomes develops that chemistry with, right? And to your point, in the past, he really has liked, his slot option there. So I think that could definitely be a possibility that Juju is a under the radar player, if you will. I think that in a really similar breath for me, Bradley, Allen Lazard is somebody that in mock drafts I'm seeing go anywhere between rounds 8 and 10 in a 12-man like standard PPR format. So, with that being said, Allen Lazard steps into a situation where he's probably the clear number one in Green Bay and has not necessarily had anywhere close to that target share before. Again, they have a huge huge percentage of their, passing attempts gone out the door with Devontae Adams. So
Oh,
they're
a
going to have to
massive amount.
replace that somewhere. And so you're going to look, to a guy like Alan Lazard to potentially replace that. Also, Aaron Rodgers is not necessarily a guy to target new faces. He likes to go to people
Comfort
who he
zone.
has a rapport with. So, Christian Watson, they just picked up in the draft. They signed Sammy Watkins, but is Aaron Rodgers necessarily going to go to a guy who he doesn't have chemistry with? And Aaron notoriously likes people to be in the right spot at the right time, and that's when he's going to trust the ball to you.
Yeah.
And I think Alan Lazard this year is going to be that guy for him. So,
Yeah.
at round 8, he might be your fourth receiver, fifth receiver that you're taking in your fantasy draft, and he could end up the second or third highest scoring receiver on your team if he gets the right amount of volume there.
Which is crazy that you can get that kind of value. And Robert Tonyan, don't forget about him in Green Bay, the tight end. As long as he's healthy, I think he's going to have a real shot to be a more than decent target for Aaron Rodgers. Again, because, Alan Lazard, you're right, that comfort zone. Randall Cobb, comes back last season. Just that comfort pick because he just wants the guys that he's comfortable with. And we don't know what kind of rapport he's going to have with those new wide receivers. Have you done, I know you mentioned, where you've been seeing him go. Have you done your fantasy drafts?
I've done a lot of mock drafts for standard leagues. I've definitely put a little bit more emphasis on dynasty in my recent fantasy experience, but I'm in 2 dynasty leagues right now that I take pretty seriously, and then definitely just in standard formats here and there where I'm invited and where guys want me to be a part of it. So I have not drafted for any standard leagues yet. I have done all of my dynasty rookie drafts. But I've definitely been mocking out a lot of stuff for standard format, typically 12-team PPR. Definitely done some half PPR stuff. I'm not as much into the keeper leagues, but I definitely think it's cool. I just haven't been asked to be a part of anything like that. And I'm kind of got my hands full in regards to commissioning and stuff. So,
it's a lot of work,
if somebody else wants to invite me to a keeper, I'm more than happy to do that. But it won't be me running it.
I hear you, man. Yeah, I think I'm in 2 leagues this year, which, there's nothing too thrilling about that. One of them is a dynasty league that's coming back, and I think I just joined another dynasty league. And so they're trying to catch these hands one more time, just another league for me to go in and dominate, which I'm really excited about.
There you go.
I'll take a little bit of extra money. So say, for instance, you go into fantasy draft, starts tomorrow. Who's your number 1 pick?
Overall, I got to go JT, Jonathan Taylor. Absolutely monster season last year. He's still young. He's still going to look to get pretty much the same volume, I think, in that offensive scheme, run heavy. Indianapolis is a fantastic offensive line. He's a pass catcher. And he didn't really get injured at all last year. He was pretty clean as a workhorse throughout the entire year. So, you always hope and pray that a guy doesn't get hurt, especially at the running back position. But I don't think there's any reason why Jonathan Taylor shouldn't be your number 1 overall.
Is it bad if I'm taking Christian McCaffrey?
I don't think it's bad. I think it's potentially bold just just because of injury history alone. The guy hasn't played much in the last 2 years, but if he's there and and he stays healthy, he's probably going to be, I would say top 5 at the position is a pretty secure thing to assume with him if he's healthy for, the majority of the season.
Yeah, I don't think that's out of the realm of possibility. I think that's probably what most people would expect if he is healthy all season.
If you're in a PPR, half PPR league, you can't ignore that with him. If you're in a standard format,
oh yeah, absolutely.
Non PPR type of league, which most people don't do anymore. But if you are in that, I think McCaffrey falls way down the food chain, and most people realize that. But yeah, if you're in standard PPR, half PPR, Christian still. If he falls outside the top 5, I would be surprised, just based on pass catching ability and volume usage in Carolina. This is one of those years, though, Bradley. I think I've probably talked about this on this podcast before, but I'm a very big proponent in a draft of creating runs rather than finishing them. In the idea of if I'm sitting at the 4, 5, 6 spot in a draft, and let's say all but one or every pick ahead of me is a running back, why would I then choose to pick the 5th or 6th best running back off the board and stretch myself there because I'm worried about maybe that the running back position is thin in the draft? You should draft for talent, rather than need. And they say that in the real NFL, And I mean, that should matter in fantasy as well. I've mocked out plenty of drafts with a running back zero strategy. It's not always the best strategy, but depending on where you are in the draft positioning, I think it can be a really valuable one. I don't think that it's astronomical to assume that picks 3, 4, or 5 in this draft could be wide receivers. Justin Jefferson going right
100%
after.
agreed.
You see Jonathan Taylor, Najee Harris, Christian McCaffrey go. Justin Jefferson could easily be the next pick off the board there.
Yeah,
I think
Jamar
Kupp,
Chase, I've seen go in the top 6 or 7 too. I don't know if he's going to personally don't know if he's going to replicate what he did. He was a very boom or bust in some scenarios. But Jamar Chase, people are taking the shot with him with another year with Joe Burrow.
Scoring potential is huge, man. And there are some guys that anytime the ball is in their hands, they automatically have that, high chance of scoring potential with their athletic ability and their speed and just, that rack ability really. And Jamar Chase is one of those guys. You get hit the ball in his hands in space and he creates something. Deebo Samuel is similar. Tyreek Hill is a similar guy. You get him the ball and you let him work.
Yeah, speaking of Deebo Samuel, as we're on here right now, breaking news. Deebo Samuel has signed with the San Francisco 49ers. So that is absolutely a thing. Deebo Samuel stays there. How does that affect any perception you have of the 49ers offense for the fantasy season? Are you still not worried about them because they are a running back heavy team? There's maybe 2 people to like. It's probably Deebo and it's probably Trey Lance at this point. Elijah Mitchell is getting some getting some love, but they've already said they're running back by committee. So how do you feel about it?
I think San Francisco is an interesting one. I think a lot of people would disagree with me about my opinion on San Francisco. I am not a big Trey Lance guy. I'm not a big believer in him, and I hope he proves me wrong. Seriously, anytime I ever say that, I'm not a big fan of a player in regard to, what I see in their potential, I hope they prove me wrong, man. I'm not wishing for anybody to have, an unsuccessful
100%.
career, but yeah, I would say Trey Lance is a guy that I see that, he's still really young, so he's got a lot of time, but, I don't think he's the most accurate guy. I think there's a little bit of inconsistency there. When he throws out towards the sideline, I see him draw that ball back inside a little bit too much, in my opinion. He's got a cannon. I mean, there's no denying that. The guy can put the ball downfield, but, that's not everything. People love that sparkly Patrick Mahomes, 80-yard in-air pass, and, they get really, really excited about that. But that does not mean you know how to command an offense and throw a 5-yard out and, throw a slant and check down to a screen. I mean, there are simple things that you think are givens for a guy like that, and they're not. And I think sometimes he misses some of the givens. Yeah. And again, he's young, so you got to learn a lot to command an NFL offense. So with Deebo, I think it's reassuring that they gave him the money. Obviously, before that, you're hoping he doesn't hold out if you draft him.
100%.
My hesitation with Deebo is his transition from Jimmy G to Trey Lance. And a lot of people would disagree with me. A lot of people would literally feel the opposite way, and they'd go, I'm super excited that Trey Lance steps in, and that raises my stock for Deebo. But for me, I'm a little cautious with him, and that just is what it is. But I think the fact, if we're strictly speaking on the signing, I would say that's great news. You don't pay a guy that much if you're not going to feed him the football. So. Yeah.
And one thing I do want to say is I apologize. I completely forgot George Kittle existed for 5 seconds. George Kittle, probably good news for him too. Deebo Samuel, probably a guy that can take the top off the defense, open things up for George Kittle down below. Maybe Trey Lance is able to make some of those gimme passes down low. And George Kittle, even though he's getting up there in age, he's still one of the top tight ends in the game. And you're going to need a good tight end for fantasy football.
Sure thing. I'm a big Kittle guy. I got him on one of my dynasty squads.
Oh, no way.
I love the guy. Yep. Oh,
hey,
yeah.
Listen, just while we're on tight ends, Gerald Everett, the new tight end of the LA Chargers, I don't know if you read the reports, but he's quietly, because he's way out there on the West Coast, we're here on the East Coast, he is quietly having one of the best preseasons of any player in the league. I don't care what you say. If you read the reports, take notes, because if you read the reports, you watch the videos, Gerald Everett, they've put him at the running back position, they've put him at the fullback position, they've put him out at the wide receiver position, they've put him out in tight ends, and in the last 2 practices he was the most targeted player by Justin Herbert. Justin Herbert last year was top 10 in the league in utilizing the tight end. Now, Gerald Everett, an absolute freak of nature who Russell Wilson underutilized in Seattle, now goes to LA. And he's number one on my big board, and he's going almost undrafted in most 12-team leagues, which is insane to me. So DraftKings best ball, I'm all in on Gerald Everett. Just throwing that out there.
There you go. There's a sleeper for you.
there's Bradley's sleeper of the day.
I'm here for it.
I'm sure we'll have plenty of other episodes, again, on the All Access podcast to dedicate to fantasy football, where to draft tips, draft techniques. Gray does probably more mock drafts than anyone I know. So if there's a code to break, Gray is going to have it. But do you have anything else before we roll over to Carolina Panthers football and talk about sports in the Carolinas?
Yeah, I had a quick little note that I wanted to share.
Throw it out there.
Yeah. Let me pull this up because I don't want to say it wrong.
Hey man, take your time.
So,
we're in no rush here.
We were talking about we have a little rundown, Bradley and I, and we stick to it pretty loosely. We like the comments to fuel the chat, So again, if you guys want us to talk about anything, drop a comment here. We have the live chat open, so we'll definitely touch on it.
Yeah, we're here for you.
But one of the things in the rundown was we had guys who are sleepers to look for some of those later rounds, and then guys to avoid. And this is a long list, and I'm not going to sit here and pretend like you should avoid every single one of these guys, but I did find this pretty interesting. It's been 5 full years since a 27-plus-year-old running back has finished in the top 6 in fantasy points at that position.
Oh, wow.
And this year, all of these guys are either 27 years or older. Derrick Henry, Austin Eckler, Leonard Fournette, James Conner, Derrick Henry, who all of which are going relatively early. I would say most of those guys are off the board by round 3 or 4, if not all of them. And like I said, again, no 27-year-old running backs have finished in the top 6 in fantasy in the last 5 seasons. So Derrick Henry, Austin Eckler, Leonard Fournette, Derrick Henry most notably. James Conner kind of slips into that list. But those guys could be looking at, years where they start to trickle off a little bit. Derrick Henry coming off of a, relatively serious foot injury.
Yeah.
Austin Eckler, is a pass catching back, so he always has that PPR, half PPR value. But another guy who's getting a little older, they drafted Isaiah Spiller this year to potentially compete with reps for him. You're talking about Gerald Everett even cycling into the running back position there. So, potentially he starts to lose a little volume, or potentially there's an injury concern there. But just by the data, by the numbers, when you hit that 27-year-old mark as a running back in fantasy, your stock starts to slide a little bit. So I would just consider that. Derrick Henry still going in like top 5, top 8 in a lot of standard drafts here. So, just something to be aware of. Derrick Henry is a guy that I'm kind of dropping down my list a little bit here.
Yeah, he's someone that I haven't put a lot of stock into so far in a lot of my mock drafts, or even my best ball drafts that I'm doing on DraftKings. But that's really surprising. I didn't realize that for running backs over the age of 27. You mentioned James Conner. I'm not a James Conner believer. I think with better wide receivers, he's a legit weapon. I'm sure he's going to get utilized. He's going to get red zone targets there. I'm not a huge believer, but I am a believer in Darrell Williams. If you look at the way they used Chase Edmond in Arizona last year as a pass-catching back, Darrell Williams comes in as a pass-catching back from Kansas City. I think he has a real shot to replicate similar numbers to what Chase Edmond did there in Arizona last year. So if you do need a running back and you don't want to take one of those old guys, Darrell Williams is someone that you can get down there near the end of the drafts.
So many young guys to go after. Running back by committee is becoming more and more popular.
Huge.
So I'm telling you, look at some of those older guys who the injury, concern is potentially there, and look at the guy who's behind him. Because I guarantee you guys like A.J. Dillon and Tony Pollard and Alexander Madison, those guys are falling relatively low on draft boards. And, for any of them, if Dalvin goes down, if Aaron Jones goes down, if so some of their, top guys go down, they're going to replace those reps. I mean, they're not just going to stop running the football. So, when you get into those later rounds and it feels like the running backs are pretty scarce on the board, look at who's ahead of them. Determine for yourself, is this a guy that demands a lot of reps? And if he's out,
where are they going to go?
Are they going to have to replace those reps? And so for some of those older guys, that's a smart conversation to have with yourself.
Yeah, beautiful points. And I think we really do need to have just a fantasy football drafting tips and techniques episode with you, Gray, where we can just throw, hey, man, give us 5 tips that are going to make me a better fantasy football drafter. And that's what we're going to do. Absolutely.
Would love it. I'm down.
So you mentioned drafting a running back that is going to protect you or handcuff you just in case in the event that your number one running back goes down. So as we talk about the Carolina Panthers, number one running back's going down, CMC. He appears to be healthy. He says he feels healthy. He's probably behind the best offensive line. Would you say that he's ever had here in Carolina, just from a bird's eye view?
It might be a fair assumption. I would say when he was a rookie, maybe you could have looked at that line and made a case. It's hard to tell when you don't really know what this offensive line is like yet. Like, we technically haven't even really seen them in pads.
Correct.
So, and those big boys, it helps them to bump a little bit to do their job. You know what I mean? When you're just wearing T-shirts and protected helmets and stuff, it's a lot harder to execute your block scheme. And I mean, I know fans are worried. I've seen a lot of fans speaking to the idea that in a lot of those videos, you are seeing some of those blue jerseys on defense fly through that line at Baker and at Sam and at Matt and stuff. And I can recognize that, but I would also then say, imagine blocking a guy who's probably, a couple pounds lighter than you, probably a little faster than you are, and you can't really hit them. You kind of just have to stand there and use your hands a little bit. Like, those guys can't do much when they can't thud around, So I think it will help next week for people's perception of the O-line to see what they can do with helmets and pads on and when they're really kind of out there pushing each other around a little bit. I think it would be fair to say that there's certain potential for it to be the best offensive line that he's played behind. Sure.
And, you mentioned it. Just think about this. Like, Brian Burns, without pads, just out there in his comfort zone, just blowing off the edge of the line is completely different. Not that he's not still very good with the pads, come on. But that's completely different than him going body to body up against, whoever it is. Trey Turner, whoever you want to put out there face-to-face against him, it's completely different.
And it's so basic, I think, at the moment. They get deeper and deeper into stuff as they go, and they don't want guys getting hurt super early, especially when there's no pads on. Yeah. So, it's not like they're doing all these, like, really elaborate, pulls and stuff. I mean, maybe they are here and there, but it's not like they're scheming up to really, really try to shut down Brian Burns and double team him on this play. I mean, it's just them trying to get through the playbook and get some rapport established with guys and get guys feeling comfortable out there standing next to each other, making checks and things like that. So, it might not look great right now, and I know that's not a fantastic sign in regard to the offensive line, but I think there's so much room to improve. I mean, your left tackle might be a true rookie or a guy who's going into his second season in Brady Christensen. So there's going to be things to work through. We should not expect this offensive line immediately to come out week one and be a top 5 O-line, but they certainly have the potential to work towards that. And I think that's what we need to focus on is more, that aspect of it, that there's a lot of talent there. And hopefully the coaches can, weed out where it is and who plays best at what spot and, ultimately do their job there.
Yeah, new offensive coordinator, new offensive line coach. There's a lot of new, fresh faces there to coach these guys up because the last guy, I forget what his name is, but he was not very good here in the Carolinas. People can tell me that I'm not good at my job. Please, if you think that, tell me. I don't think he was good at his job while he was here in Carolina, nor when he was with the LA Chargers. I believe the last 3 seasons that he was there, he was like bottom. He was 26th or worse in the last 3 years that he was there with the Chargers, then comes over to Carolina. They're in the bottom 5.
You kind of wonder why a guy like that keeps getting jobs at that level too at that point. You know what I mean? It's kind of just like, all right, man, like college might be your thing, high school might be your thing, maybe, find something else, but this isn't it,
Yeah, I don't think it was cut out for it, man.
No, I hear you. I will say, though, I don't want to sit here and harp on the team. There's so many things to be excited about.
Yeah, what positives do you have? Give me some positives.
I think the O-line is still one of them. It's just, I think I've seen some feedback from fans about it, seeing some clips like, oh, look at Burns. Or,
it's easy to be critical on Twitter.
Blitz. And it's like, they're not even in pads, man. Like, what's Christian going to do? Throw his body on the line for, to block Jeremy Chin, who's twice his size in the middle of a first week of training camp.
When they can't hit the quarterback.
Right. So, it is what it is. I tell you, though, I am extremely excited to see our secondary go to work. And I know JC hasn't been out there for training camp, and I think it's just been a little soreness with him. I really wouldn't look too much into it. But, the fact that they've got JC and Dante and CJ and Keith Taylor, and they drafted Kaylan Barnes, and you've still got Stanley Thomas Oliver and Miles Hartsfield. I mean, it is – none of the, some of those guys aren't necessarily superstars, but when you have depth at corner And, when you're rolling out into dime coverage and you got guys out there who have taken first team reps in the past because of, injuries or what have you, I think it's really exciting. The top four on that line is just absolutely
Very
ridiculous.
good.
Better than they've had in a really long time. And then on top of that, you stack the safeties. You got Chin, obviously, and Xavier Woods is a really, really nice addition to the secondary. So,
Really.
and then probably the best part of the revamped secondary is nobody who's going to strap cleats on Sunday. And that's the idea that they went out and got Wilkes, man. I'm so
Oh,
excited about him.
I
Everybody who
cannot be
talks
more
about him,
excited.
they talk about what a professional he is, and just players gravitate towards him. And DBs, I talk about this a lot, but you got to have an attitude to play defensive back in the NFL. You got to believe in
Yep.
yourself, and you got to be sharp, and you cannot take a single play off or you're burned. And I think Steve Wilkes is the type of guy to really get people to buy into what they're doing, buy in every play, show them those little things, ins and outs
Yeah.
here and there, where they can improve their play every single play, and just make themselves the best players they can be. And you hear that from the players, and that's the most important part. So I'm ecstatic about the secondary this season, and to see what they can do behind, a pretty young front four,
Yeah.
with that defensive line.
It's crazy because I really think, and you kind of hit on it, that the back four, when last year we were looking at this, it felt like the front four were going to be the strong-armed bodies of this defense, and that's where it was going to start was, Brian Burns, Hassan Reddick. That's where it was going to start. Shaq Thompson securing it up the middle. Derrick Brown was going to take these huge strides that we all wanted him to take, and the secondary was the concern. Now, it feels like the secondary is going to put us in a decent spot. We're probably still going to give up 150 yards rushing a game, but
Sure.
the secondary at least has a chance to create turnovers.
That's the biggest thing there.
I think that's huge for us because
Yeah.
in the event we have below average quarterback play from whoever's taking snaps week 1, there's still an opportunity to get some of those turnovers back that are inevitably going to end up happening
Sure.
from a bad pass or tipped pass, whatever it may be. But getting and generating turnovers is going to be huge. I know just a few days ago, Dante Jackson, who I absolutely love, the leadership quality that he now brings to this team from being arrogance, not the right word, but from being, like you said, cocky, have an ego, which you do need. You absolutely have to have as a defensive back. From him coming in as that young guy to now being like a legitimate leader on this team.
You can see that
is
transformation.
Huge. Yeah.
Yep.
It's so good. And then obviously J.C. Horn being healthy for a full season, fingers crossed, is going to be massive for this team.
Well, and then, I mean, C.J. Henderson's a first-round draft pick.
Exactly.
And obviously, it didn't work out for him in Jacksonville, but now he's working with a new team. Steve Wilkes, he's not really expected to have to do as much here as he probably did, in Jacksonville. So, you look at him, and all of a sudden he has to have the pressure of being like a cornerback 1, cornerback 2. Now he's like a slot guy or the fourth option. I mean,
yes.
I wouldn't want to work against him if I'm the 4th, 5th receiver on a team getting reps,
No.
coming in on a trips package or something like that, having to work against a former first round draft pick. So,
Yeah.
I think there's a lot there. And then I think Jeremy Chin is one of the smartest players on the team.
Brilliant.
I think he's one of the most physical players in the league. And I certainly wouldn't want that guy hawking over me either. So, you combine that. And then J.C. Horn has serious, true man-to-man cover ability, which we haven't had probably since James Bradbury. And I would say Horn even has the potential to be, a good bit more elite than Bradbury did. So you kind of throw all that together. I'm not saying that it necessarily even comes full circle this year, but even like Derrick Brown, man, I feel like he catches a lot of flack. He does so much in the run game. Defensive tackles, people look at a guy like Aaron Donald and think like, oh, why isn't my defensive tackle getting sacks like that? And
Not
it's like,
everyone
okay,
can
well,
be Aaron Donald.
yeah, most defensive tackles aren't getting 20 sacks a season. That's not really a position that you're typically. I mean, it's, of course you expect to get a few sacks here and there, but that position is not you're not leaning on your D tackle to get you sacks, man. That's what your D ends are for. That's why you blitz safeties. That's why you bring corners. Your outside linebackers, but your defensive tackles are there for the run. They're there to plug stuff up and to create chaos in the middle. And when you watch Derrick Brown play, you might not see it reflect in the stat sheet, but that man is in there wreaking havoc in the middle every play. He stuffs up the middle quite often on the run.
Good effort.
I think he took leaps and strides last year, by the time the end of the year rolled around. So I really think that there's a lot to be excited about with the defense. I think it actually is going to be a secondary-led defense, maybe similar build to what Seattle had. Scott Fitterer kind of looking at that
Yeah,
mold and saying that worked.
100%.
Let's do it again. But I'm excited about this defense. There's a lot of question marks on the offense, and I think that's just fair. But I think that defense, it was a unit that was pushing, top of the league numbers for a while last year. And
Mm-hmm.
they were getting put in terrible positions off of turnovers, short fields. Time of possession was a real issue for the Panthers, and that defense still went out there and balled, man. So I'm excited to see what they do. And they did it all without JC, who is a first round lottery pick, and now they
Yep.
have another first round lottery pick in Ecam on the other side. I mean, they're really starting to put some pieces together. It is only a matter of time, before this team really starts taking the strides they need to be super competitive.
Yeah, that's what I want people to just have is, push the positivity, man. Like keep a glimmer of hope. I'm not going to come out here and say that the Panthers are going to go 17-0 like I did last year, okay? We're going to start off 1-0, take it 1 week at a time and see where that ends up. Just
Yeah.
all you got to do right now, focus on beating Cleveland. There's a
Sure.
huge storyline there. You look at the offensive side of the ball, Baker Mayfield obviously wants to get after it. Sam Darnold has a fire lit underneath him. Matt Corral is making people is making people very excited from the special trainings that we've been seeing and the special practices. Do you want to talk about the offense real quick? I know you've been talking about your positives for the defense.
Sure.
What's the most positive thing we can take away from this offense so far?
I mean, I would have to just say that, I think it's exciting to have new faces in the quarterback room. I think it would have been a real disappointment to walk into this season with, the same or similar faces in there. I think that they went out and drafted Matt Corral. They've gone out and they've brought in Baker Mayfield, and they still, are giving Sam Darnold a chance. And, I think it's nice. Competition breeds success, and to have two new faces in that room to force Sam Darnold to compete, I think it makes everybody better.
Yep.
Ultimately, I do expect Baker to win that job, and I think he should. And I don't think there's any reason that you go out and trade for a guy like that if you don't anticipate that he, ultimately takes that job. But I like that they've created competition in the quarterback room. I think that's ultimately going to be a beneficial thing for this team.
Yeah.
I think with Baker, man, what's exciting is looking at his opportunity with DJ. You got a guy in DJ who's gone over 1,000 yards 3 straight seasons, 1,200, I think, actually, if I'm being correct there, for 3 straight seasons. And you pair him suddenly with the best quarterback he's probably had since he got here, considering the fact that Cam wasn't fully healthy by the time he rolled around. I think you're really going to see a chance for DJ to explode in a way that maybe he has been contained a little bit before. And I think Baker just brings a fire to that offense. I mean, you think about what he did with Cleveland. I'm not saying he's, as healthy as the young guy that he was when he circled around with Cleveland and kind of brought their situation back. But that thing to me, man, was more moxie even than it was, necessarily his play on the field. I mean, he was a great player and he made a lot of great plays, but he willed that team back to success. And he started getting the rest of the roster to believe in the success of that team. And that is the key. Plenty of guys got drafted by Cleveland leading up to Baker who were competitors and good players, but they didn't have that ability to will others to believe in them and the team and the united success of the organization. And I think Baker's just a guy who exudes that on his own, and he doesn't even really have to try. And I like that we've put somebody like that in the driver's seat. I think ultimately that again will breed success, for the offense.
100%. To come full circle, you mentioned it at the beginning of the show, Josh Allen. Got that dog in him. He wills his way to victory. He puts the team on his back. He's one guy that's going to sit there, motivate you to play better, motivate you to give it your all each and every week. Whoever it is, whoever the coaches decide is going to be that quarterback, man, I hope we see improved play. I'm sure we will. I hope we will. The offensive weapons are still there. Like you said, DJ Moore. 2 years ago, DJ Moore and Robbie Anderson were second and third in the NFC South in receiving. If you follow me on Twitter, again, at Brad M. Lee, you can follow Gray at Gray_Salter. I mentioned it, man. I think the Carolina Panthers could potentially have 3 players over 1,000 yards offensively. I know that's going way out on a limb, but that's my bold statement of the year. I think
1,000 total, 1,000 receiving.
I think receiving. I think CMC can have over 1,000 receiving if he stays healthy. DJ Moore, and then maybe you get Robbie Anderson in there. He did it a few years ago.
Sure.
Maybe he does it again. Don't know. But that's my bold. That's gonna be my bold prediction when we do bold predictions later on. That just remember it. I'm already putting it on paper.
All right, I hear you. I'm a big believer that Carolina is still one legit receiver away from being a real threat offensively.
Mm-hmm.
I like Robbie, and I think he there's a lot of qualities about him. He stretches the field. He clearly plays hard. Um, there are parts of me that don't think that if the Panthers are going to be a legit, serious football organization, that he can be your go-to legit wide receiver too. The best offenses in the league have, two guys who could arguably compete for wide receiver one. You look at the Chargers, for instance, Keenan Allen, Mike Will. Those two guys are dogs, right? You look at the Bengals. They got Jamar Chase, T. Higgins. Those two guys are dogs. You look at Seattle last year. They got Tyler Lockett. They got DK Metcalf. Those guys are dogs,
Agreed.
right? So I think every team has got to have some level of that. And I'm not sure that Robbie quite gets us there at times. I think it leans on DJ a little bit too much, if you will. And I think if you, it's not even saying that you need to get rid of Robbie necessarily, but money would factor in a little bit. But if you were able to draft a guy, let's say the Panthers, finish, middle of the pack, maybe picks 15 through 20 next year, and they go out and they draft a receiver in the first round, I think that could be actually a really, really smart move. You have an offensive line that's pretty young. They're starting to get their stuff together. You've invested multiple picks over the last few years on the defensive side. They're really starting to come together. Maybe Baker Mayfield has a decent enough season where they bring him back in, or Matt Corral starts to take that helm.
Mm-hmm.
What, if you look at this team, is the position of need that you would fill at that point? You maybe could argue offensive line, edge rusher, wide receiver for me, to make your team truly deadly on the outside. Let's say they're able to draft the fourth or fifth receiver off the board in the draft, next year. You pair that with DJ, Christian, Robbie, all of a sudden your offense goes from good to scary.
Yeah.
And a part of me feels like that we're still just like right underneath that,
just short
of being elite. You know what I'm saying? I think this offense 100%. Is good. I think the fact that they added Baker makes it a lot better. But I think they're an offensive line piece and a wide receiver two away from being truly a playoff offense that I think would have a good chance.
Yeah, and like you said, man, it's really good to remember. That's how most of the offenses are, where they have two really good wide receivers. You mentioned a couple, Minnesota, JJ and Adam Thielen. You look anywhere you go, the Cowboys.
Miami now,
Miami.
Jalen.
Yeah,
the teams that are serious about winning, they have two guys who could arguably be wide receiver one anywhere that they go, and that's just the fact.
Put multiple threats on the field, spread that defense out. They can't just focus in on CMC or just DJ Moore, as we have come accustomed to, unfortunately. As we said earlier, man, we appreciate everyone that hops into the chat. Bailey and Kincaid, appreciate y'all pulling through and letting us know. Throw everything and anything into the chat. We're willing to talk about it here on the All Access podcast. I think that might be it for the Carolina Panthers. Do you have anything you want to add for any sports happening around the Carolinas?
We've been focusing a lot on football. I'm not going to go too far into it. A few weeks ago, the Canes made a few moves. Really excited about what they've been doing. I know it was a really disappointing end of the season for, some Canes fans. I was a little deflated after they went out in the playoffs. I just felt like they didn't necessarily put their best foot forward in that last series. But they hustled and it was fun to watch. I mean, I'm not going to stab at them there, but I do think that they got better somehow this offseason, and they lost a few players that had pretty significant ice time for them. So I won't go into it, and we don't have to sit here and have a full conversation. But in regards to, other things in the Carolinas, really excited about what the Hurricanes are kind of building there, and we'll get into more of that once, their season rolls around. And then we haven't mentioned much of this on here, but Charlotte FC, it's been a while since we've gotten on here. So this is rather old news, but that team was expected to come in at the beginning of the season. People are looking at that roster thinking to themselves, I wonder if this team wins 5 games. I wonder if the team even has a chance to get off the bottom of the floor of the rankings. And they have fought and been middle of the pack, I would say, but just fought every game. They're exciting to watch. They play good soccer. They've had a few games here and there where it wasn't their night and they didn't look so great. But to think about what the expectation was for that team and to think about where they are now, even including their attendance numbers, they have like top 10 attendance numbers in the MLS.
It's crazy.
It's awesome. I mean, it is so cool. I love that soccer is a presence in North Carolina. I grew up a soccer player, so really like what Charlotte FC has been able to do in 1 year. Wish that the Panthers got as much attention and nurture as Charlotte FC did in their first year from David Tepper. Maybe they'd be a heck of a lot better. Huh?
Yeah, it's interesting to see the fan support that's out there. I've been fortunate enough to go to a couple FC games. You can see, if you watch on YouTube, you can see my flag or my scarf behind me. It's mind-blowing the amount of support when you go to these games, the fans standing on their feet for 2 straight hours, cheering, chanting, drinking all of the beer, the player interactions that they have, the singing, the songs.
Yesterday there was a lightning delay for like 3 hours, and a bunch of fans stood out there, and they ended up, I think they postponed the game, and the players came out, and the fans were still out there clapping, and the players gave them like their own little ovation because the fans had been out there for so long waiting and didn't end up getting to see the game that day. So you're right, man. The fan support there is strong. I've seen cars around town here with I'm in Wilmington, North Carolina, so I'm not even right in Charlotte, and I've seen cars with the Charlotte FC sticker. One of our local breweries got a bunch of beer glasses from Charlotte FC, and they served me up a beer, and I turned it around. And I was like, "Oh, Charlotte FC, like that's
my
awesome."
boys.
So, yeah, man, I love it. I'm here for it. I'm glad soccer's growing in the Americas, and I'm glad that Charlotte gets to represent that now too.
Yeah, and I hope just a little bit of that fandom bleeds over into the Carolina Panthers, because, man, I don't want to be sitting down there. The 500 still get it. Don't get me wrong. The uppers for Carolina Panthers games, they're still loud. They still
you going to a few games this year?
Oh, absolutely. I'm going to be going to a couple games. Listen,
we should. I'm gonna have a busy schedule, so I might not get to as many as I typically would like to. But if I'm up there, we'll have to link up, man. I'd love to see it again,
dude. Oh, we absolutely have to. We are going to make that happen. I'm saying it right now. We're going to make that
Let's
happen.
do it.
Okay. Awesome. All right. Before we get out of here, again, this is the Allaqcess podcast. You can hear it live on YouTube, and then if you can't make it and you missed any part of this show and you want to go back and listen to it, you can find it on iHeartRadio, Spotify, Apple Podcast, Google Play, wherever you listen to your audio, wherever you ingest it. Find us. You know what? Just tell Alexa, play Allaqcess Sports podcast on iHeartRadio, and your mind will be blown. What kind of parting words do you have for us to throw this thing out?
Glad we're back. I know it's been a little while, but I think we're going to try to do this a little more consistently for you guys now. So hopefully you'll come back and join us again next week. Definitely hop in the chat. I really appreciate Bailey and Kincaid tonight because we didn't have a ton of chat activity, but I appreciate you guys jumping in there, and we like the chat, fueling the discussion. We like to know that we're speaking to things that you guys appreciate and care about. So let us know what you want to us to talk about, answer, touch on. We love to hear from you. We'll point out what you say in the chat, and have a good time with you. So we really appreciate it. I would love to talk fantasy before it's irrelevant or too late in regard to drafts and stuff. So if you want to set up something like that, we don't have to do it next time. But I know you had mentioned doing like a full, 30, 45-minute fantasy special. I could definitely sink my teeth into that, as always. So
take a big old bite out of that fantasy football. Barbecue. Listen, I'm 100% down to do that. I would absolutely love to. But guys, we appreciate you hanging out with us today. See you next time. Follow us on Instagram, follow us on Twitter, so you can stay up to date for when we are going to go live next. We appreciate the hell out of you. Y'all have a